Let me ask you a question. Do the words Cyberpunk open world RPG pique your interest? Now if the answer is yes, I am willing to bet that the game that came into your mind wasn't the one we're reviewing today, but rather another teeny tiny small game coming later this year. But back to the matter at hand. In this video, we'll be taking a look at Dex, an open world action RPG adventure set in a cyberpunk setting, developed by Dreadlock Studios and published by Cubic Games. So is this game a worthy appetizer for a much bigger title coming later this year? Hello, I am Venti from N-Gaged, and this is my review of Dex for the Nintendo Switch. Now, before we start the review, let me warn you that this game is not meant for kids, as it has many adult themes and imagery. Dex is a 2D action RPG adventure game set in a cyberpunk setting where you play as Dex, a resident of the city of Harbor Prime. The gameplay cycle has you exploring your surroundings, talking to other characters, doing quests, and leveling up along the way. The quests will have you engaging in combat, which can be approached in a variety of different ways, like melee, range, or stealth. You can specialize in one of these aspects or use a mixture of them. You can also use hacking to stun enemies or disable cameras or turrets. Now, the combat is really bare bones. For melee, you can only block, attack, and dodge. And most enemies have only two types of attacks, a regular attack which are blockable but too fast to react to, and a special unblockable attack, which is telegraphed so you can dodge your way out of it. So you quickly realize that the melee combat is basically holding the block button until an enemy starts attacking you and then counter-attacking them when they're finished. And when they do their unblockable telegraphed attack, you just have to be on the lookout to dodge it. And that is basically the melee combat. Later in the game, I found the combat to be really exploitable by just hacking an enemy to stun them for a few seconds and doing a chain attack on them, and then stunning them again before they have a chance to attack me. This would also work with multiple enemies since I could stun all of them and defeat them one by one. The range combat was basically just shooting at someone until they get close to you to attack you. Or in the case that they also had a gun, you would just exchange fire like 2 bullet sponges until one of you falls down. Now I found the stealth approach to be the most fun to me, but it was also pretty basic. You have to scout the area for cameras or turrets which you can hack or try to avoid. You also have to check on the enemy's patterns to try to sneak past them or to try to assassinate them from behind. Some enemies are immune to this and you will actually have to fight them. The hacking part is a twin-stick shooter in which you navigate through areas trying to get to important nodes or to steal information. My criticism here lies in that as you progress through the game, if you don't level up your hacking skills, some of the levels seem to get impossibly hard, as there are certain enemies that spawn even more enemies and your rate of fire simply isn't enough and you get overwhelmed pretty fast. On the other hand, once you level up your hacking skills, the levels become way too easy and there isn't much of a challenge. I just wish it was a little bit more balanced. You could also use dialogue to approach some situations and avoid the combat entirely. There's also this issue that if a mission was particularly challenging, I would find myself fast traveling back and forth between my base to restore focus and healing myself up. And speaking of fast traveling, you will find yourself doing this way too much, as there is little incentive to going back to areas you've explored previously, as nothing much evolves or changes. The controls are okay, with only very minor inconveniences. Like sometimes I would accidentally push the left stick while aiming my jump, and this would activate the hacking mode, which would lose all my jump's momentum. The third time this happened, I tried to remap the controls and I just found that this wasn't an option. Also, exiting out of a menu with the B button makes your character jump. There are also some minor interface nuances, like the lockbox's dials only turning in one direction. And I know I sound like I'm really reaching here, and that's because I am. Like I said before, the controls are fine and these are all minor inconveniences. The pacing of the game is good for the first half of the game, but then depending on how you spec, it becomes extremely easy. And since the gameplay doesn't change much, it starts to feel stale. The final part of the game became quite a drag for me. It felt like I wanted to see the resolution of the story, but the gameplay was just going through the motions. Gameplay scores a 6 out of 10. The game takes place in a cyberpunk setting, in the city of Harbor Prime, where you play as Dex, a girl who quickly finds herself chased by a mysterious organization. You make allies along the way as you find more about the world and your place in it. I think the strongest aspect of this game is its world building. The setting is inspired by Blade Runner and Neuromancer, with references such as eyes and risking brain damage while running through cyberspace. It touches on subjects such as an enhanced or post-human population, an ever-increasing discrepancy in the world between social strata, a society heavily influenced by drugs, and other subjects which are very representative of the cyberpunk setting, but I won't touch upon because they might be considered spoilers. The narrative is conveyed through various means. Dialogue, which is fully voice acted except for the protagonists, but we'll get to that later. There is also a lot of extra information scattered around the world, like notes or emails for those who want to immerse themselves a bit more. The backgrounds also do a good job at portraying the city and its denizens. There is also the very occasional cutscene at certain points in the story. The setting of the game and the world building is very immersive, and it's enhanced by a great soundtrack. The contrast between the luxurious districts and megacorps of the city, with the poor back alleys and junkie contested slums, enhance the setting. As for the voice acting, some of it can be a little bit off-putting, but it's okay in general. Now, one of the things that really broke my immersion was having the protagonist partially voice acted. She is the only character in the game who doesn't have her dialogue be fully voice acted. In fact, she rarely is. And it was not even that her particular voice acting was bad, but rather, the lack of having her be fully voice acted made me shape her in my mind into the certain personality based on the choices I made in the game and by my own view of who this character was. So in the very few occasions when I got to hear her voice, it completely broke my vision of her. I think they should have gone with a completely silent protagonist so you could project your vision of her into the character. Or if it was more of a linear game, maybe have her be fully voice acted instead. Narrative scores an 8.5 out of 10. All the characters are hand-drawn and animated frame by frame, which really stand out against the environments of the neo-noir city of Harbor Prime. The portraits look good and give more personality to the people you meet. There is a bunch of detail on the environments which would otherwise feel empty or bland. The interface, while nothing unique, serves its purpose, and the text size seem okay to me while in handheld mode. As for the style they went for, the characters are pixel art and the environments are smooth of much higher resolution. It gives a sense of retro without looking dated at all. Now, let's talk about the sound design. The soundtrack is really good. It enhances immersion rather than pulling your focus away. The voice acting is good, although there are some lows for sure, but overall good quality. My only complaint about the sound is in the hacking sections. Due to the nature of the twin-stick shooter gameplay, all you hear is your shots being fired non-stop. As for the performance, there was fluid frame rate across with very few dips. Across the whole story I may have experienced about 4 dips which happened while loading in, which while noticeable didn't impact my enjoyment since they only lasted for a couple of seconds. Presentation scores an 8 out of 10. As for the pricing, the game is $19.99, £17.99 or €19.99 or your local equivalent. It has the same price in other platforms, so there's no Switch tax on this one. It's digital only, but there's a physical edition which you can pre-order at Red Art Games for €29.99, but will be limited to just 2,800 copies. As for the duration of the game, I clocked around 16 hours to finish the main story, but I did take my time exploring every nook and cranny, and I did most of the side quests. Although there are multiple endings, the quote-unquote branching paths that lead you to them are in the very last part of the game, so you can save your progress and see them without having to start another playthrough. There are many side quests and some extra things you can unlock, such as suits, augments, etc., but nothing that I would call substantial for a second playthrough. Value scores a 6.5 out of 10. Overall, Dex scores a 7.2 out of 10. So the TLDW is that Dex is a 14-hour narrative-focused RPG whose setting is inspired by both Blade Runner and Neuromancer, which are pillars of the cyberpunk setting. Its weakest aspect is its combat system, and its strongest is its narrative. This is a good, albeit pricey, appetizer for the much anticipated Cyberpunk 2077, with some very apparent flaws. I would recommend this to anyone who is itching for a story-driven game set in a well-realized cyberpunk setting and can forgive some of its gameplay faults. Now, if you're not that interested in the setting or are more focused on the gameplay rather than the narrative, I could only recommend this game if it goes on sale. So that was my review of Dex. If you found it helpful or informative, please subscribe, as I will be uploading more reviews as well as more content to the channel. Also, please let me know if any of you are picking this game up or are just waiting for a sale. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Stay engaged!